Outside the airport, snow fell like thick white curtains, turning Christmas Eve travel into a crowded, slow test of nerves. People shuffled in lines, rubbing cold hands, watching flight screens blink delayed. The air buzzed with holiday tension. Parents hushed crying kids. Couples whispered their worries. Everyone just wanted to be home. Through this busy scene, Emily Ward walked into the gate area. She looked like someone who had come a long way by herself. Her hoodie was plain, her boots worn, her jeans faded from many journeys, and an old duffel hung from her shoulder. On her duffel, barely visible, was a small, faded patch. It belonged to a special military group, known only to those who had faced terrible nights. 3 college students nearby spotted her right away. One smirked, calling her homeless. Another joked she looked too weak for military training. The third shook his head, certain she wasn't a soldier. Emily didn't react. She stood still and calm, a quiet strength about her that needed no explanation. Just a short distance away, Navy SEAL Ryan Brooks, waiting for orders, looked up. He had heard their words. His gaze landed on her duffel. He saw the patch and he stopped moving. Emily shifted her weight a bit as the line moved slowly. Old habits took over without her even thinking. Every door, every exit, every corner of the airport had been noted in her mind the moment she walked in. It was a kind of watchfulness you never lose. Not after seeing the dust and danger of Afghanistan. Not after standing in alleys where a small sound could mean big trouble. Years ago, she had been part of a secret military team. It was a job she earned quietly and did even more quietly. No fame, no parades, just long nights, tough tasks, and keeping promises in places most people couldn't find on a map. She had been out of the military for 2 years, learning to live in a world much softer than the one she'd known. She lived alone in a small rental outside town, taking jobs that allowed her to stay private. The heavy memories she carried weren't visible, but they squeezed her heart at times like this. Crowds, loud sounds, the kind of disorder that made her pulse quicken, until she willed it calm again. This Christmas was special, though. It was her first time returning home in years. Her father's voice on the phone had been warm and shaky, promising the porch light would stay on all night. That promise meant more to her than any present, but the 3 students nearby didn't see any of this. They only saw what they expected. The boy in the Letterman jacket nudged his friend, pointing at her duffel. "Look at that old thing," he said loudly. "It probably smells musty." The girl with her phone tilted her head, acting like she was checking Emily from head to toe. "I bet she couldn't even finish basic training. Did she even try?" She laughed at her own joke, tapping her phone. The third, holding a small camera, grinned at the lens. "She's never seen real action. She just wants attention." Their words were just loud enough for Emily to hear. She didn't react. Her breathing stayed even, her shoulders relaxed, no sign of anger. She simply held her boarding pass gently, her eyes soft, watching the stream of people, the festive lights, the airport workers guiding the crowd. Her quiet manner wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a practiced, deeply learned control, the kind that had saved her team on nights when danger was everywhere. Ryan Brooks, the chief petty officer, watched her from nearby, not out of curiosity but because her stillness sparked something in his memory. He had seen that way of standing before, feet solid but relaxed, shoulders down just enough to save energy, not to show weakness, hands steady, eyes scanning in a specific way. Even the slight shift she made to ease an old hip pain spoke volumes without a sound. He had served with many like her, skilled, serious people who had endured experiences that forged a deep respect within them. He watched her hands, especially how her fingers rested near her bag strap, flexing just a little as the 3 students got louder, not in defense but in quiet readiness, control. Brooks had spent many years in uniform, been deployed many times with various special forces and soldiers. He knew the difference between someone faking it and someone truly trained. Emily wasn't faking anything. If anything, she seemed to want to blend in with the crowd. He stayed far enough away. He didn't speak to her, didn't ask about the patch yet. He respected the quiet space she seemed to protect. Some veterans choose to live private lives, not because they are afraid, but because they prefer it. Brooks understood this deep. Still, he felt sure he knew the story behind that patch. A story known only to a few from a night that was still talked about among them. So he watched silently, showing respect, waiting to see if she wished to remain completely unnoticed, or if the situation would change. The line barely moved. People shifted their weight, sighing loudly as another delay announcement came over the speakers. The frustration in the crowd was thick, like steam from a boiling pot. With each passing minute, holiday impatience grew stronger. The three students behind Emily seemed to feed on this tension. The boy in the Letterman jacket leaned forward again, glaring at her duffel as if it personally bothered him. Seriously, he told his friends, this old thing needs to quit, just like her. He reached out and lightly pinched the strap between two fingers, shaking it mockingly. Emily stepped back instantly, a small but sharp movement. Please don't touch the bag, she said softly. Her voice wasn't harsh or loud, but it had a clear strength that allowed no argument. The girl snorted, tilting her head with an exaggerated air. You act like you're protecting top secret stuff. She folded her arms. Look at how she stands, like those mall guards who think they're soldiers. The third one lifted his phone, pointing it to catch Emily's face and her duffel. Dude, this is great. She probably practices saluting in the mirror. Their laughter grew louder, uncaring and brash, echoing through the waiting area as if it belonged. A few other travelers looked over, but no one stepped in. Holiday travel made people just want to get home, avoiding any extra problems. Brooks felt his jaw clench. He moved one small step forward, staying where she could sense him but not bothering her. Years of training churned within him. The urge to act was strong, ready to surface, but he also knew a line existed. Some veterans only chose to fight when it was truly needed, and he didn't want to decide that for her. Emily never looked at the three students. Her eyes stayed on the gate, scanning her surroundings with steady focus. Her quietness wasn't fear, it was control, a skill learned not in schools but in dusty, dangerous nights where every sound carried too far, and silence meant survival. The girl leaned closer, her voice high and sharp, too scared to speak up, always the tough act. Emily slowly breathed out through her nose, calming herself, but deep inside, something settled, cool, not anger, but a memory. The airport around her blurred for a moment. The bright Christmas lights faded, replaced by cold windswept mountains. The far-off chatter of travelers became the low thrum of helicopter blades cutting through the icy Afghan air. Christmas Eve, a night she tried not to recall but one that never truly left her. That night, snow mixed with sand, blowing sideways like sharp glass, cutting exposed skin. The wind screamed over the mountaintops, carrying the far-off sounds of gunfire. Her hands were numb in her gloves, her breath thin from the high altitude. She still saw the red trail of a bullet flash past the soldier in front of her. She remembered the crackling radio, the hushed voice saying they were trapped, with few choices left. She was part of the small team climbing those rocks to reach the soldiers, who were surrounded by enemies hiding in the dark. The mission wasn't meant to happen, it wasn't meant to work, but there was no other way. Lives hung in the cold winter air, and Emily moved with clear intent, leading injured soldiers down the ridge while under attack. The patch on her duffel had been sewn onto her gear the next morning, not as a prize but as a reminder of the night everyone came out alive. Her fingers now touched the bag strap, not to guard it, but in silent memory. She was pulled back to the present when the boy tugged at the strap again, testing her calm, almost daring her to react. Emily stepped back another inch this time, more firmly. Brooks moved again. His body shifted, almost unseen by others, but clear to someone who shared his past. He was getting ready to act. His gaze sharpened the moment he saw that patch, the faded symbol earned by only a few special soldiers. It wasn't something you bought in the store. It marked a night when everything went wrong, and a small group of people held strong. The girl now raised her phone, pointing it at Emily. "Smile for the video," she said. Emily kept her stance firm, unwilling to give them any reaction. The boy in the Letterman jacket elbowed his friend. "Dude, record this. Maybe she'll lose it." Brooks felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had seen people speak this way before, people who made fun of what they didn't get, who felt strong by belittling others, but seeing it aimed at someone who had carried injured soldiers through enemy fire, someone who had risked her life on a night when most Americans were simply wrapping presents, made an old, protective feeling swell inside him. He took a slow breath, centering himself as he would before entering a dangerous space. His heart remained steady, his eyes stayed fixed. He was now near enough to clearly see the details on her duffel pack, close enough to notice the small tear at the edge, where the threads had worn thin from many tours. He knew exactly what that patch meant, and even more, he remembered the events of the night she earned it. He had been in a different unit, supporting that same mission. Every soldier in that area had heard about the rescue. A small team, outnumbered in harsh winter conditions, fighting for miles to save men who believed they wouldn't live to see another day. And here she stood quietly in an airport line, while strangers made fun of her for looking different. The three students laughed again, their sound sharp across the terminal. Brooks tightened his jaw. He could feel the tension building, like a fist clenching. The line moved forward a tiny bit, but no one felt relief, because something was about to change. He didn't know how or when, but he knew the truth was coming, and when it did, the laughter of those three kids would stop dead, and Emily Ward, trying so hard to be unseen, would no longer be able to hide her true self. Brooks stayed just far enough not to crowd her, but close enough to notice small things most people would miss. The students' laughter still echoed, but his focus was now on something much more important: her posture. Emily stood with her feet flat, her weight even, not leaning or fidgeting. Regular people always shifted, rocking on their heels or crossing their arms, but she stayed perfectly balanced, a trait he'd only seen in those trained for quick, efficient reactions. Every few seconds her eyes moved, not to glare at the students, not to notice the stares. They followed paths, they checked corners. They tracked openings in the crowd, emergency exits, the speed of airport staff. She was looking for dangers, not faces, and she did it so smoothly that most would think she was simply bored. Brooks knew what it was right away. Her left sleeve slid up for a moment as she fixed her bag, showing a faint set of scars near her forearm. Small, pale lines, the kind left by sharp bits of metal. They weren't big, but they were old, healed by time, not by doctors. She pulled her sleeve back down without thinking, covering them with the easy habit of someone who preferred not to be asked about them. Her hold on her boarding pass stayed firm, not tight or nervous, just steady, the way someone holds important papers in a busy foreign airport, checking them only when necessary, but always knowing where they are. Even the way she gripped the corner with her thumb and two fingers looked precise, deliberate, clean. Another announcement sounded overhead, and an older couple struggled with a heavy carry-on near the seats. The husband pulled at it uselessly, his hands shaking a little with age. Without a word, Emily stepped forward, bent down smoothly, lifted the bag easily, and placed it on the seat for them. She did it quietly, gently, without holding eye contact longer than needed. Then she stepped back into line as if she had done nothing at all. The wife smiled warmly, reaching out to touch Emily's arm, thanking her. Emily nodded once, a small respectful gesture, and returned to her spot. It happened so naturally, so quietly, that the three students should have been shamed into silence. But they weren't. The girl scoffed loudly, nudging her friends. "Oh, look, now she's trying to act nice for attention. I bet she wants people to think she's important." The boy with the camera snickered. "She probably hopes someone says, 'Thank you for your service.'" Their laughter echoed again, but something in the air changed. A businessman in a long coat, typing on his laptop nearby, stopped mid-sentence. He looked at Emily, not with scorn, not with pity, but with a quiet sense of something not quite right. Not fear, but a knowing that her quietness was more than just embarrassment. Her stillness was too sharp to be normal. Something about her reminded him of people he'd met long ago. People who had seen enough to move gently, knowing the cost of violence. Brooks saw that look. It confirmed what he already believed. Even everyday people could feel something special about her. Then something else caught his eye, something so tiny and faint that anyone without his background would have missed it entirely. As Emily moved her sleeve again, adjusting her wrist. He saw a thin, dark line near her inner forearm, almost hidden. A muted tattoo placed on purpose where only those who understood would ever see it. A ranger tab. Not the large, obvious kind soldiers sometimes showed off with pride. This one was small, almost a secret, tucked away like a private memory. The kind soldiers chose when they wanted the honor, but not the spotlight. A tattoo meant to be kept, not displayed. Brooks's heart gave a sudden, strong beat. There it was, the final proof. The patch, the scars, her way of standing, her quick moves, her silence, it all fit together. And now the tattoo brought every clue into place. She wasn't just a former soldier. She wasn't just someone who had served. She had worked directly with special ranger units. She had been on missions that demanded more than regular training. She had been in places where you either learned true control or you didn't make it back. The three students laughed again, unaware and carefree, their voices echoing against the holiday decorations and glass. But Brooks no longer heard them. He was looking at Emily, realizing she wasn't just someone he recognized. She was linked to one of the toughest Christmas Eve rescue missions he had ever known about. He breathed out slowly, a calm breath from a place deeper than thoughts. His pulse remained steady, but something inside him changed. Respect, understanding, a sense of duty. Because once you truly know who someone is, you can't just watch while others misunderstand them. And he knew Emily Ward now. He knew exactly who she was, even as she tried and failed to vanish into the airport crowd, like a shadow trying to merge with the bright day. Another delay announcement crackled over the speakers. This one was longer and filled with more apologies. The gate agent's voice shook slightly as she explained the plane needed another check due to ice on its wings. The moment the news settled, the airport filled with groans and frustrated whispers. A man slapped his ticket against his leg. A woman mumbled she'd never make it home for Christmas. Even the faint holiday music now seemed weak, drowned by the growing stress. The three students behind Emily groaned the loudest, complaining the line was cursed. They weren't looking at her anymore, too caught up in their own annoyance. But something else was about to change the mood. A small boy near the seats was playing with a toy drone, an early gift from his parents. He ran the little device across the floor, making engine sounds with his mouth. Then someone bumped him, and the drone slipped from his hands. It slid across the smooth floor, rolling toward a row of chairs. Before anyone could react, it hit a metal leg, bounced and shot straight toward Emily's feet. It happened in a flash, nothing more. The drone hadn't stopped sliding when Emily moved. She dropped one hand, shifting her weight with a smooth, exact motion that seemed out of place in a normal airport. Her fingers caught the toy just before it would have crashed into the chair's base. Her movement was clean, quick, perfectly timed. Too fast. She stood up and handed the drone back to the child without a word. The boy beamed, thanking her with shy joy. His parents nodded their thanks before taking him back to their seats. For the first time since they started making fun, the three college students fell silent. The girl frowned, like she had seen something she couldn't quite understand. The boy with the camera blinked hard, lowering his phone. The boy in the Letterman jacket mumbled, "Did you see that?" to his friends. Brooks saw it clearer than anyone. His eyes widened just a little. That quickness wasn't ordinary. It wasn't by chance. It wasn't luck. It was a skill built into her body from training under stress. The automatic reaction of someone who had spent years catching far more dangerous things in much worse situations. It was the natural response of an expert who had moved through places where every split second mattered. Before he could think about it more, a new kind of worry filled the airport. A gate agent stepped out from behind the counter, her voice louder than before. "If anyone here has medical training, we need help." A sudden quiet fell over the crowd. An elderly man in a nearby seat had slumped over, his face pale, breathing weakly. His wife held his hand, her voice filled with panic as she called his name. A few travelers stepped back carefully, unsure what to do. Brooks looked around, expecting someone to come forward. A nurse, a doctor, a medic heading home for the holidays. Someone. But no one moved. No one except Emily. She stepped out of line with that same calm, steady manner, kneeling beside the man without asking for leave or drawing attention. Her voice was gentle as she spoke to him. She asked simple, clear questions. She checked his breathing, felt his pulse, gently lifted his chin to help him breathe easier. She steadied him with movements so skilled and sure that even the gate agent paused, watching her work. The old man's breathing grew steady. His eyes opened a bit wide. His wife whispered a relieved thank you. Emily nodded once, then gestured for more room around him. When the airport medical team arrived with their gear, she stepped back at once, giving them space without staying close. No words, no boasting of her skill. She simply returned to her spot in line as if nothing special had occurred. The three students stared at her. All their earlier boldness had vanished, replaced by a puzzled silence. The girl whispered, "How did she know all?" The boy in the Letterman jacket slowly shook his head, replaying her actions in his mind. The camera guy mumbled, "No way, she's just normal." Their whispers now weren't mean, they were uneasy. Brooks watched Emily, a quiet understanding settling over him, like a familiar weight. The exact medical skills, the quick moves, her way of standing, the tattoo, the patch, everything made sense. He knew exactly how she knew. He knew exactly what she had done, and he knew that the three students behind her had no idea how near they were to the truth about the woman they had spent the last hour laughing at. Brooks had held back as long as he could. He had seen the toy drone catch, the calm medical help, the scars, the tattoo, the patch. He had heard her voice when she spoke to the old man, steady and comforting, the same sound he'd heard from medics in the field when everything else was chaos. He felt his own mind recalling an uninvited memory of a very different Christmas Eve from long ago. Now the line had a strange quietness. Some travelers still complained about the delay, but the mood around Emily had shifted. The three students no longer laughed freely. Their looks at her were different now, careful, wondering. The businessman kept looking up from his laptop, observing her with silent respect. Brooks knew if he simply walked away, no one here would ever learn who she truly was. She would get on her flight, sit in a regular seat, and go home like any other traveler in simple clothes. The world would go back to ignoring people like her without a second thought. He couldn't allow that. He stepped out of his spot in line. It wasn't a showy move. No shouting, no angry words, no challenge. He simply moved closer, standing slightly to her side where she could see him without feeling cornered. Emily noticed him coming, her eyes darting toward him for the first time. Up close, the patch on her duffel was clear. The muted colors, the plain symbol, the stitching worn from real use. Task Force Iron Shepherd, a secret military group that existed for a short time in a harsh winter, over 10 years ago. Brooks felt the years disappear, recalling the cold wind, the crackling radio messages in the dark, the urgent pleas for rescue from trapped soldiers on a mountain ridge, where no friendly troops were supposed to be. He swallowed, then spoke just loud enough to be heard. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady and respectful. "Were you with Task Force Iron Shepherd, Christmas Eve, Afghanistan?" The words landed heavily. Conversations around them quieted. The businessman stopped his phone call mid-sentence. A young Marine in a hoodie looked up from his phone. An older Army veteran by the window slowly turned, understanding dawning on his face at the name of the task force. Emily didn't answer right away. For the first time since she entered the airport, her calm broke a little. It wasn't fear, it was the look of someone who suddenly faced her past, reaching out over many years. Her eyes searched Brooks's face, noting his rank, his strong presence, the honest look in his eyes. She looked down at her duffel, at the patch, then back at him. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "Just that. Nothing more." It was enough. Brooks straightened his back. His heels clicked together on the airport floor with a sharp sound, a movement out of place for a regular travel day. Without a moment's pause, in front of the line, in front of the three students, in front of everyone, Ryan Brooks stood perfectly straight. He raised his right hand in a sharp, perfect salute. The kind of salute you give not to a stranger in old clothes, but to someone whose choices helped bring your comrades home when death was near. The airport terminal became completely silent. No one scrolled on phones, no one complained, no one laughed. The gate agent at the desk stopped typing, her eyes wide. Children who had been fussy moments before now watched quietly and still, feeling that something important was happening, even if they didn't know why. Emily gasped. She looked around once, as if wishing this moment would remain small, but the silence around her did the opposite. It made everything bigger. She took a small step back, uneasy with the attention, but she didn't turn away. Instead, she did something simple and truly respectful. She placed her duffel down, straightened her shoulders, and returned his salute with a calm, steady movement. No show, no drama, just the quiet respect of one skilled soldier recognizing another. A Marine nearby, dressed in regular clothes but wearing a worn baseball cap, saw what happened. His eyes went straight to the patch on her bag, then to her strong posture. His face completely changed. Slowly, he rose from his seat. An Air Force airman by a charging station stepped away from his phone and stood tall. An older Army sergeant, retired with a face marked by many years, pushed himself up from the bench with his cane. One by one, every person in uniform, or who had once worn one, who could stand in that airport, did so. Some placed hands over their hearts, some stood at attention, some simply stood tall and lowered their heads in respect. They didn't know her full story yet. They didn't need to. They knew enough. The three college students stared as if the ground had opened beneath them. The girl's phone hung loose at her side. The camera boy's hand trembled slightly, his earlier grin entirely gone. The Letterman jacket boy looked like he wished to disappear. Brooks held his salute for a long, slow moment, then lowered his hand. He turned slightly toward the gathered travelers, his voice still calm, but now reaching further. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is Staff Sergeant Emily Ward." He didn't add extra details. He didn't make it dramatic. He simply spoke the truth. 12 years ago, on a Christmas Eve in Afghanistan, he said, soldiers were trapped on a frozen mountain under heavy attack. The weather was getting worse. You could barely see, and the chances of getting them out alive were. He paused, searching for the right word. People listened, unmoving. Some had known about that news quietly, through certain sources. Most had never heard it. She was part of the special team that went up there, he continued. That patch on her bag, the one you all ignored, is from that night. She helped bring those soldiers home when they believed they would never see another Christmas. He didn't say hero. He didn't need to. He looked back at her, his eyes firm. "I was in a unit supporting that mission," he said softly. "We heard the radio call. We heard their voices come back over the air. We heard the difference between goodbye and we made." Emily swallowed, her eyes bright but steady. She shook her head slightly, as if trying to push away the praise. "I was just doing my job," she whispered. Brooks gently shook his head. "With respect, Staff Sergeant," he answered. "Many call it a job until a night comes when they have every reason to quit. You did not." She shifted her weight again. The familiar unease with attention returned. She tried to blend back into the background, to pick up her bag, to disappear into the line as if none of this had occurred. Brooks took one step closer, not to trap her, but to make sure his next words were heard clearly by everyone nearby. "People should know who stands in their lines," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it held a seriousness that hushed the crowd. "They should know who waits quietly at their gates in worn boots and old hoodies, who carried more than just bags, so the rest of us could complain about flight delays instead of funerals." For a moment, the airport changed. The decorations, the music, the delays, the ticket desks, all of it felt less important than the simple truth standing before them. A woman who had braved winter in a war zone so that other people's children could return to warm homes and bright Christmas trees. A woman who now stood trying hard to appear ordinary, while the world around her finally saw her. The silence after Brooks's words settled over the airport like fresh, soft snow, absolute and impossible to ignore. People stared at Emily with new understanding, a new respect they hadn't known they owed her until now. And slowly the three students, who had spent the last hour making fun of her, began to fall apart. The girl stepped forward first, her phone fully lowered, her face stripped of all pride. She opened her mouth twice before any sound came out. "Ma'am, I'm truly sorry," she finally managed, her voice shaking. "We didn't know." The boy in the Letterman jacket swallowed hard. His boldness was gone, replaced by a tense, guilty feeling in his shoulders. I shouldn't have touched your bag, he said. I'm sorry, really. I didn't mean, he trailed off, realizing how little he understood. The boy with the camera looked down at his shoes, ashamed of his laughter, of pointing his lens at her as if she were a show. I shouldn't have recorded you, he said quietly. I'll delete it, all of it. I'm sorry. Emily looked at each of them, her face steady, calm, unchanged. No anger, no bitterness, just the kind of patience that comes from having seen things far worse than rudeness in an airport. It's all right, she said softly. Just be kinder to people you don't know. Her voice wasn't scolding or lecturing. It was gentle, almost tired, a reminder, more than a correction. The three students nodded quickly, stepping back, carrying a lesson that would stay with them long after this night. But the moment didn't end there. A small crowd now gathered around her. Travelers who had been rushing minutes earlier were suddenly still, drawn to her like a quiet center. One man shook her hand with trembling thanks. Another woman wiped her eyes and told Emily her brother had served with the Ranger unit and would be home this Christmas because of people like her. Emily kept her replies short. A nod, a quiet thank you, a soft safe travels, each one honest, each one humble. Then a little girl in a red coat stepped out from behind her mother. She held a candy cane in her gloved hand, squeezing it so tight the wrapper crinkled. She walked up to Emily, reached up, and placed the candy cane in her palm. Thank you for letting them come home, the child said. Emily stopped still, not from discomfort or surprise, but from something deeper, something that touched the unseen burden she carried and eased. Her eyes softened, showing the first true emotion she had allowed since entering the airport. She knelt a little to meet the girl's gaze and smiled, a small, strong, thankful smile. You're very kind, she whispered. Merry Christmas. Brooks watched this moment from nearby, feeling something tighten in his chest. Not regret, not sorrow, just deep respect. A strong, unchanging respect for a woman who sought nothing and deserved far more. He took his phone from his pocket and paused only for a second before tapping the contact named Dad, emergency only. It was the number he had used once during a mission when he thought he wouldn't live through the night. The call connected, and Brooks kept his eyes on Emily as he spoke soft. Sir, he said respectfully. Your daughter's on her way home. You're a very fortunate man. There was a silence on the other end. A soft, emotional laugh. A shaky breath. Brooks nodded to himself, ending the call with a quiet promise. She's almost there. At the gate, the agent who had been typing before came closer with quiet urgency. Her eyes were shiny with feeling as she found Emily's flight details. Staff Sergeant, she said gently. Emily blinked, surprised. Yes, the agent cleared her throat, trying to sound professional but unable to hide her admiration. We've given you a better seat. No charge, it's the least we can do. She handed over a new ticket and added softly, Merry Christmas, Staff Sergeant. Emily looked at the ticket for a quiet moment, then looked up. Thank you, she said. Truly, the agent smiled. Have a safe trip home. For the first time in years, Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, something she had lost somewhere between missions and quiet living. It wasn't praise she sought, it wasn't to be noticed. It was simply this, the feeling of being understood just once, without needing to explain herself. The crowd slowly moved back, giving her room, but their eyes followed her with respect as she picked up her duffel and got ready to board. Even the three students stood silently, changed by a few minutes they would never forget. And in the middle of that busy Christmas Eve rush, the airport had found something special. Quiet bravery, quiet thanks, and a quiet hero, finally seen for who she truly was. Emily walked toward the boarding gate with her new ticket, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders like an old backpack. The gate agent lifted the rope and guided her forward, her voice kind and respectful. You can board now, Staff Sergeant. Emily nodded, though she still seemed a little uneasy with everyone watching her. She didn't speed up or slow down. She simply moved with the same quiet steadiness she had shown all night. The crowd naturally made way for her, as if a silent understanding had spread among them. Brooks stood just a few feet away, his hands clasped behind his back. When she came close enough for him to see her face clearly, he stood straight once more. Not with the strict formality from earlier, but with a warmer, personal, meaningful gesture. He gave her one final salute, a clear, respectful motion, a goodbye from one soldier to another. Emily paused, her grip on her duffel tightening. She returned the salute softly, almost shyly, then lowered her hand with a quiet breath. She didn't need words, neither did he. Behind them, the three students watched in complete silence. The girl held her phone at her side, its screen dark. The boy in the letterman jacket kept swallowing, his face pale, his earlier proud look gone. The camera boy's hands hung loose. Guilt and wonder mixed in his expression. They didn't speak. They wouldn't dare. The lesson had hit hard. The kind that doesn't disappear by morning. Humility had found them, just as the truth always does. Suddenly, without a warning, and impossible to ignore, Emily stepped forward, giving her ticket to the agent. She began her slow walk down the jet bridge, the tunnel's low hum echoing her steps. Each step felt lighter, more peaceful. The airport's noise faded behind her until all she heard was the soft sound of engines outside, and the gentle whoosh of her own breath. Inside the plane, the flight attendant showed her to her new, better seat by the window. Emily carefully placed her duffel bag, sliding it under the seat as if it held something more precious than clothes. When she finally sat, she let out a slow, steady breath. Then her eyes moved to the old patch on the side of her bag. Her fingers gently traced it. The fabric was worn, the edges frayed. The stitching was almost gone after so many years, but the memory it held was as clear as ever. She closed her eyes for a moment, and saw the mountains again. The swirling winter wind, the freezing darkness, the far-off gunfire, the faces of soldiers who thought they wouldn't make it home. She remembered holding a teammate's hand and whispering, "We're getting out. I promise." She remembered keeping that promise. And now, on a different Christmas Eve, far from that cold mountain, she felt the weight of that night change into something new, something lighter. Not pride, not sadness, just a quiet thought of what it meant to serve and what it meant to help others get home. Outside the window, snow fell in soft flakes, catching the runway lights. The plane's engines rumbled gently, warming up, sending a faint shake through the floor beneath her feet. Other travelers began to board behind her, their voices low, their steps careful, as if the respect from the terminal had followed her onto the plane. Emily leaned her head against the cool window, watching the ground crew move through the falling snow. She touched the patch once more, then rested her hand in her lap. The engines kept building power, a steady promise that soon she'd be flying, heading to the one place she hadn't allowed herself to return to in years. Home, with a porch light waiting. Heroes don't always look like what people expect. They don't always wear fancy uniforms or tell loud stories to impress strangers. Sometimes they stand quietly in busy airports wearing simple hoodies and old boots. Sometimes they carry old bags with patches that mean nothing to most people. Small pieces of cloth faded by wind, by years, by nights that changed lives forever. Some heroes move with a silence that isn't weakness. It's memory. It's discipline. It's the quiet strength of those who have seen the damage noise can cause, who have learned that true power is often a steady breath, not a shouted word. Emily Ward was one of an example of the thousands who serve, who come home, who blend back into daily life without asking for praise for their sacrifices. Hours later, when the plane finally dropped through the clouds and landed on a runway far from war, Emily looked out at the familiar lights of home. She felt a lightness inside her, a release she hadn't known she was waiting for. When she stepped off the plane, snow falling softly around her, she walked through the small airport doors and saw him. Her father stood there, older than she remembered, his eyes warm and bright. Behind him, through the glass doors of their house, the porch light glowed softly, just as he had promised. It had been left on all night, waiting for her return. He opened his arms without speaking. Emily walked into his embrace, letting herself be held for the first time in years. No applause, No speeches, just a father welcoming his daughter home on Christmas Eve. That moment said everything. Respect isn't about rank, or medals or patches. It isn't about how people look, or what you assume. It's about truly seeing people, seeing them for who they are before the world tells you who they should be. It's about understanding that quiet strength often hides in those no one notices, until a moment asks for their truth. Emily walked toward the waiting car with her father, the porch light still shining behind them. It was a reminder that some lights are kept on because someone out there made sure others lived long enough to see them. If you are reading this and you honor the men and women who spend their holidays far from home, who serve without asking for thanks, then offer them something simple and heartfelt. Leave a message of respect for every veteran spending Christmas away from the people they love.